Hey, folks, we are live, and I just realized that I forgot to properly set up the stream in the group. So I just need a description. Let's see. I got my title. Where's my description? I didn't know. I normally write these things down ahead of time. There we go. And I could just copy paste it, but I didn't. All right. Perfect. Save. Now it should let me go live. Come on, Facebook. Oh, I can. Woohoo. Push the button. Yay. All right. Now we're going live everywhere. And it's always a bit choppy at first for some reason when I'm firing up um, everything. But it should be good in just a second. So I hope that everyone is doing fabulous today. I'm actually doing pretty darn good. Life is pretty awesome in general. Can't complain. Um, I know some of you out there are having some pretty warm weather. We're largely done with our really warm weather for the time being, at least. It was in the like 90, 100 range over the weekend, and that was a whole situation, but a lot better now. All right, let me just quickly get my everyone post up. For those of you who follow me, I'm sure you'll have heard me say there are no silver bullets many times. It's kind of one of my things, and I feel like just a lot of people hunt for silver bullets a lot. And come on, everyone, autocomplete. Thank you. It's time for lunch with Mal. There are no silver bullets. Hey, how are you doing, Miss Ocampo? Yeah, definitely long time no see. So yeah, so today we're talking about how there are no silver bullets, and I have a whole bunch of talking points. I've been listening to a bunch of different business podcasts lately, and they sort of helped me give voice to a lot of ideas I have in my head that I can't articulate as well as I'd like. So now I've got that. I've got a little more oomph behind that. Hey Jill, and hi Pippa. And yeah, definitely a long time no see on YouTube. I do stream here like every week, so you can always come and hang out um, if you're around. I don't stream my writing anymore, but Um, I do stream this podcast. It's officially a podcast now, So, oh, that's awesome! You finished writing the novel. I am proud of you. It's been a long road for a lot of us since the pandemic, so I'm glad you got there. I feel like it's still a little bit choppy. Let me try killing that thing. Oh, there we go. I have my camera control software open. Apparently, it actually makes it pretty choppy while it's open. Oh, everybody is like sending me messages right now. So many messages. Hey, Kate. So I hope, like I said, I hope everyone's doing all right. I hope the heat isn't too bad. I had the hottest time of my life in this past weekend because we're turning our attic. We have a walk-up attic above our garage, like staircase and everything. Nice normal staircase, not like a pull-down staircase. And we're turning into a workshop for our daughter, um, which means we got to insulate it and get wiring done and all sorts of jazz like that. And so I've built the walls because the roof comes all the way down. It's like 6.5 feet, 7 feet in the middle, but then the roof comes all the way down. So I built walls at about the 2 foot high mark. Um, and and then the electricians have done the wiring, and I did a bunch of the blocking and additional work in the rafters and the insulation this weekend, and it was over 120 degrees in there, and I've never sweated that much in my entire life. It's still kind of choppy, and I'm kind of annoyed by this. Why are you being so choppy, video? Why are you doing me like this? Like my computer's like practically asleep. It's not doing anything. It's in snooze land. Oh well, we'll persevere. We'll survive. I guess I could always drop it from high quality. We'll go down to 720p. No, it's not really any better. Ah, this is going to annoy me. Maybe I should just let it go. I'll just let it go. All right. So, got a few people in here now. It's funny. It's actually not showing me how many people there are live on Facebook right now. But oh, there it is. All right, so we got like a good 15 people across everything. So everybody else is chatting in our Facebook group on Facebook. It's the Writing Wives group. Hey, Marisha. So I talk a lot about how there are no silver bullets in book publishing and in marketing. There's lightning strikes every now and then where like someone has the right thing at the right time, but you can't plan for that. You can't plan for a lightning strike. If you're the lucky recipient of a publishing or lightning strike, go with it. But if you're not, you can't try to figure out how to stand in the right place to get hit by lightning. And so a lot of times I feel like a lot of us authors, we spend a significant amount of time looking for that silver bullet, for that lightning strike, or if we just do this one thing, we will see success. And that's not a thing. It's not a thing in writing, it's not a thing in business in general, it's not a thing in life in general, right? Like there's no one thing you can do in life to have like the perfect life and the perfect happiness. And I heard something today that really resonated with me, and it's called. The person said there's let me get his name. Did I close the window? I might have closed the window. Yeah, I closed the window. His first name's Alex. Jill knows who he is. He actually makes startup software or software for gyms like that help them start up. I think it's called Gym Start or something like that. Anyway, he said there's no silver bullets. There's just 100 golden BBs. And I really like that because there's not a one thing you can do, but there's these small things you can do. And together they add up actually to have a larger impact than one just epic thing that you could do. Um, and it really resonated with me. And he talked a bit about how you think about the companies that had like this one amazing founder, like Steve Jobs obviously comes to mind, but there's lots of companies like that where there's this one person who really comes up with this idea and they're this great founding personality, and they're probably a perfectionist, a little bit obsessive, but they know what those 100 BBs are, and they load them all in and they make sure that everything is on point. They're like, okay, how is this art going to resonate in this market? How is the book going to look to this customer? Does this feature work properly in all the places we intend for this feature to be used? And then they just go with it. They fire on all cylinders. They get all those little things going. And a lot of times when that one person, that founder, that person with the vision leaves the company, people are like, oh well, do we really need this thing? It's only this one small thing and it's kind of expensive, and they take away BB and they take away another one. And maybe 6 months, a year in, maybe you're down to 97, 96 BBs, and you really can't tell the difference. But you give it 5 years, and suddenly half of them are gone, and now you're running like half of the perfectionism and quality and focus on all the little things is gone, and the product flounders. And I think that really happens with authors as well. We need to think about what are all those things. Are we like getting our messaging right? Are we writing great taglines? Are we really thinking about genre and trope? But are we also like really looking at the story as well and making sure the story is good and then it flows and it has hooks and threads and open loops and all that sort of thing that you have to do. Um, and sometimes it's a lot, and sometimes we don't always do it. But there's some reasons for that, and there's ways to get better at that. But I'm going to read the comments here because Pippa has a long one. I've had a issue with Facebook ads recently. Facebook won't let me have Facebook feed only in the placements. If I don't put in Instagram feed as an option and try and publish the ad, I get an error message saying I can't be used. So taking Instagram account, a business account, and back into a personal account. Obviously not ideal. Do you have a solution to this? Yeah, run your ads on Instagram for goodness sakes. Why are you unchecking Instagram? For so many genres now, there are more readers on Instagram than there are on Facebook. For certain genres and age groups, like Facebook's like making you do this because they're like, what the heck? Actually, it's probably a bug, but yeah, run your ads on Instagram would be my answer to that. I've talked a lot about this. I've run the numbers, and Instagram is a viable place to show your ads. It's actually like the logic of only running your ads on the Facebook feed has never made sense to me. Because if I'm targeting by people, I'm saying I want this kind of person who's interested in these kinds of things, and I'm going to make ad creative that appeals to them and will get them to click. Why does it matter where they see it? Right now, the feed will work the best because it's where most people spend most of their time. But it's not like it's not like these people become a different human being when they're somewhere else on Facebook. Now, are certain placements that don't work well because of the physical mechanics of the placement. For example, still images on the Reels feeds don't work well because people sometimes think um, that they're a video that just doesn't autoplay, so they click on it, and then they're like, "I didn't mean to land on some random book site on a page on Amazon." And they go back. So there's mechanical reasons why you might want not want to use certain placements, but the human beings are the same human beings regardless of where they are. Um, Alec, Alex Hormozzi, yes, thank you. I would never be able to pronounce that. And Jill says yes, perfect. Facebook for old people, and old people don't use Instagram, but they read my cozy mystery. So I was actually talking to someone the other day, Pippa, and they're like, my audience is really primarily older people. And I'm like, do you really think that younger people don't read this kind of book? Or have you only been advertising to older people? But I would also say that no matter what you write, there are a million people on Instagram who read what you write, regardless of age. There's gonna be a million of them on Instagram, um, that you could target. So, and also, if you're running ads for still images, Facebook just doesn't show them on Instagram very much, because it's hard to be competitive. So just leave Instagram checked. Facebook's hardly going to show it on Instagram anyway, and then you're fine. Sort of seems like a non issue. I'm also not dissing old folks. I know, but I do feel like a lot of us authors have focused so much on a particular advertising medium that is dominated by older people that we get it in our heads that younger people don't read our books, and it's just because we never exposed younger people to our books. And I've talked with a lot of authors who thought they only actually worked with a lot of authors who thought they only appealed to older people, and then they actually got some working on TikTok or on Instagram and discovered that, oh hey, there's a lot of younger people that like my book too. But even if you run the numbers, like you run like cozies, I bet you that I could build a cozy audience that's Instagram only. That's probably 5 million people. Um, so it definitely can work. So that that would be my answer. Just let it roll on Instagram. Um, but even before things have changed recently, I always ran my ads on Instagram. I've never picked just the Facebook feed. Dawson is the one who started promoting that back in like 2015. And I like looked at the data and I'm just like, this makes no sense. And no one's ever been able to convince me since 2016 that 2015 is when he started saying it. 2016 is when I started running Facebook ads. So it's been 8 years and no one's ever been able to convince me to only run ads on the feed. It also makes your ads cost more if you only run them on the feed. And Facebook even says this. They're like, we're going to charge you more money if you only run your ads on the feed. It's going to be in the box, and they're not lying. They do charge you more money if it only runs on the feed. Um, so so yeah. So popping back to the 100 golden BBs thing, the interviewer and he were talking about this example that I've actually heard a bunch of times, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I actually believe it based on my own personal experiences. But there's this pottery class, and the pottery class teacher is like, okay, you're gonna be judged, or your grade's gonna be on one thing. You have to make the best pot possible. And he says it to one group. So he's got one group of people, and he tells them that they have to make the best pot possible. And he has this other group of people, this other class, and he says, you're going to be graded on how many pots you can make. So we got these two different classes: best pot, volume of pots. And then at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, the class that goes to make the most pots possible also makes the best pots, because you can't just sit down and create a masterpiece without practicing a lot. And the very act of doing it over and over again and getting more familiar with like the medium that you're working with and the nuances of it, the things that can go wrong as you try to make lots and lots of a given thing, is the thing that makes you better at it. And that's sort of like with our writing, it's the same thing, um, you're not going to make a perfect first book. I remember when I first started writing, and I wrote my first book, and my editor actually wasn't. she wasn't super thorough. She was actually a pretty, I would say, lax. She was good and she had amazing insights. But she only gave me back 800 corrections in a 110,000 word book. And now I know that she should have given me like 8,000 corrections back in that book. Um, but I think possibly too, my first book was just so bad and so rough that that she couldn't do that. Like it had to be polished more. It's like it's like if you're like working with wood and you've got like a rough piece of wood and you try to use thousand grit sandpaper on it to get it smooth, you just can't do it, right? You got to start with like 60, then 120, then 200, then 400, then 600, then you can run the thousand grit sandpaper and make it really smooth. You can't go right to it, and she was working with something that needed like 20 grit sandpaper to start, right? So she gave that level of edit, and then it took subsequent edits to make a better version of that book. um and in many regards that actually applies to our writing as well, right? Like our first book, it can't an editor can't make it better, and in some regards even we can't make it better. It would need to be almost rebuilt. It's like, imagine if you were building a table with very little experience. Your first table, it just might only be able to be so good. You might have to like go make a new table eventually, or just tear it apart and start from scratch if you want to actually make a better table. And maybe you'll use some of the components. Maybe some of the wood will still be good, but a lot of it won't be. Um, but I remember I got those 800 edits back from her, and I was just like, this is terrible. I'm never going to write again. I thought I was amazing, and clearly I'm not. I've produced garbage, and I closed the document she sent me back, and I didn't even look at it for days. And um and then eventually newsflash, spoiler alert, I continued writing. I think it was around like my fourth or fifth book when I handed that off to the editor. I'm like, this is the one where I've aced it. They're going to come back and be like, wow, I barely need to do anything. This was a pristine masterpiece. Nope. Same number of edits, but they were like more nuanced, and they were maybe about like, sometimes you start making new mistakes. Like I swear, every time I think I've got like a literary tick down, like a particular thing I'm always having my characters do, a word I'm overusing, get that one licked, new one shows up. It's like, it's a curse. So um so there's for me, perfection is something I know I'll never achieve, but it's something I continue to strive for. But I really do feel like it wasn't until I hit about my 100th book that I really started to feel like, wow, I'm actually a good writer, and I'm not just faking this anymore. It took that much practice to be able to be so good at it that I could just produce a book practically with my eyes closed, because I understood how to do all the different parts of book to make it work. And this sort of comes down to understanding things and to memory. So when it comes to like being able to remember things well, and if you can remember things well, then you can like use that thing in execution. If you can't remember it, you're not going to use it when you're executing. That piece of information isn't going to work. And you do not improve memory by inputting the thing over and over again, by going to lots of classes or learning lots of things or listening to the same podcast or study. You won't remember it better. The way that you improve memory is to take it out of memory over and over again. That's what improves memory. And that's why the making the 100 pots, why the writing the 100 books is the thing that makes you good about it, good at it. You can, and the interesting thing too is we all know this, right? You go to school and you're putting it in. And we know that if you want to find someone who's really good at doing a particular thing, do you take the person with 20 years of experience, or you take the person right out of college? You know, we all know that that has 20 years of experience, they might work slower, but they're going to make fewer mistakes because they know all of the pitfalls, they know all this nuance and whatnot. And that's because they've been pulling it out of memory over and over and over again. Yes, perfection. You're right. Perfection is boring, right? Be messy, make mistakes. And of course, there's no such thing as perfect art. Da Vinci, I believe, is the one that said, great art is never completed, it is simply abandoned. And I think that is definitely true for our books as well. Um, so, yeah. But I do think sort of one of the things that I think a lot of us authors um, have to come to grips with, and possibly never stop coming to grips with is the fact that there's no better way to turn something you love into labor than to monetize it. Um, and there's a saying that, like, do something you love and you'll never work a day in your life, and that's not exactly true. Like, it's a good truism, but at the end of the day, like, I don't know, like, let's say you like playing badminton, of all things, or pickleball. We'll go with something hip, pickleball, and you love playing it. Well, the interesting thing is, like, you if you don't feel well, or you're busy, or you don't feel like it, you don't have to go play pickleball. If you're sick, or if it's raining a little bit and you're getting a little bit cold, or maybe you drank too much the night before, you don't have to go play pickleball. It's fine. But if you want to become a professional pickleball player, you have to go to work on all those days when you're not feeling well. And I think it's the same thing for writing too. And that's like a hard thing for a lot of us to deal with. The fact they're like, man, I just don't enjoy writing as much anymore. It's like, yeah, because it's work now. You have to do it. You got to sit down and put out those words. And then, of course, unfortunately, what comes along with that is judging ourselves if we fail to put down the words. Um, but I don't know why I segued off onto that, but I guess I thought it was worth mentioning. Um, Another thing I think that holds us back as authors a lot, um, and we talk about this a bunch, is how, um, you know people say stay in your lane, and I hate the saying stay in your lane. Um, it's it's reductive, and it's putting people in a box, and I do not like that. I'm a really big proponent of, if your lane's not working, get out of your lane. Try a new lane. I mean, you would not see me here today as I am if I stayed in my lane. You know, everything I've ever done in my life that has been successful was me jumping out of the lane that I was supposed to be in and doing something new. Um, and honestly, being in the same lane all the time just kind of sounds boring, And I think we all feel like that deep down. Um, but we do worry a lot about people copying us. A lot of times we got our eyes on other people's paper while we're doing the test. And um, I know a lot of authors I see say things like, it comes up in the groups all the time, like this author copied another author's idea, or they plagiarize something, or whatnot. And sometimes those accusations are true, but it's in my experience, it's like an almost imperceptible minority of times that those statements are true. Um, it mostly is that there's only 7 stories, and most of our stories are going to be the same. But the other thing too is, like, if other people are copying you, it's not the worst thing in the world, right? Because people tend not to copy things that aren't working. It's when nobody's copying you that you might have to start to worry. And if you're doing something that no one else is doing, you have to ask yourself one of two things, like, is no one doing this? Well, I guess is one question, but it has two possible answers. Is no one doing this because it's a brand new idea that no one ever thought of before, or is no one doing this because people have tried it and it doesn't work? And actually, a lot of times you can kind of tell just by, like, trying to find those books on Amazon and looking at their rank. If you can't find them at all, then hey, it's actually a new thing that no one's doing. But if you can find them and they don't have great rank, that's going to tell you something, um, as well. So you can always look at it that way. Um, but I do feel like every time that anytime that there's a there's a vacuum, there's an open spot in the market, that is always an opportunity. But you do have to, take the time to sort of decide, is it something viable? And that's where experience comes in. Um, you can't substitute anything for anything else for experience. Um, and that's sort of like, I think the thing as well, though, is that if you're unsure about if there's a story in a particular area, the best art is the art that's always made for you, the artist. If you make it for yourself, it's gonna be better than if you try to make something that's just commercially viable. If you just sort of, like, get the spoon some pap out of the pulp mill jar and spread it onto the pages. Um, because it has no soul if you're doing that. But if you're making it for yourself, and you're like, this is a book I want to read, this is a story I'm interested in, then you know that at least there's one customer, you, and chances are you're not super unique. But the other reason why is that authenticity attracts other people. the more authentic you can be, the more you're going to attract other people. And that's something that I found with myself. I've talked about this in the past about um, how after I came out and people saw this authentic me who was unafraid, I mean, or at least appeared to be unafraid to show myself for who I was, people were drawn to me because authentic people tend to be more truthful. They're not lying because you, unless they're just authentically a liar. But generally, or at the very least, even if they are, authentically a liar, you know it because they're wearing it on their sleeve. But usually they're honest about themselves. They don't have secrets. They don't have walls, and you don't have to worry about any sort of duplicity with them. And that will translate into your work as well. So the more authentic your work is, the more you're going to actually draw people into you. So if you make the book that you want to read, you make the art that you want to see, you will actually attract more people than if you just try to make something that's just generically commercially viable. Um, and that ties into like the marketing that you do as well. If you're just chasing the algorithm, what you're really doing is you're losing your authenticity and you're just shifting toward the mean. You're making the most average thing that you can. That's what the algorithm's looking for, right? It's looking for the most average thing that's going to appeal to the largest group of people, and you're going to sacrifice your authenticity when you do that. So that thing that actually makes you unique and interesting and have a draw is the very thing that you get rid of when you chase the algorithm. So that's why I'm not a fan of doing that. I'm a fan of being out there and honest and real about yourself and your stories and your marketing, more than anything else. And that's also how you build your brand, by the way, too. Because if you're doing what everybody else is doing, chasing the algorithm, trying to fit in, then your brand doesn't stand out either. You look like everybody else. All right, Pippa says, owing to my advanced age, I can't get a job and am forced into full-time authorship. To my surprise, I'm loving it. I was afraid to become work. And I guess it is work, but I love it far more than the miserable jobs I had at the end of my career. I mean, to be honest, Pippa, like if you do have to go to work when you're not feeling it and things aren't going well, or it's too cold or it's rainy or you drank too much the night before, what's a better work to do? Work you love or work you hate, right? I mean, all things being equal, doing work you love is always going to be better. um and I do believe it'll feel less like work, but it will make it feel a little bit more like labor, perhaps, than it was before when you're just doing it purely for fun. And expectations are a big part of that. Jill actually has a friend who's been like, doing authoring things for quite some time, and her books have never really picked up, but now they are picking up. And she's like more scared now and more nervous and anxious about her writing than she ever has been before. Because before it was no expectations, right? It wasn't, even though it's like not a measurable income for her yet. She could walk away from the money in a heartbeat. The There was no expectations, and now there's expectations, and that alone, can kind of make it feel a bit more like labor. um, hey Kay, how's it going? Now you need to expand this and make it a master class. So our talk is way more fire than I expected. Thank you, honey, I appreciate that. um yeah, this is what happens when I listen to all those boring podcasts while we're working out, honey. It helps me like coalesce these ideas that I frequently have. um Zocampo says, aside from my urban fantasy series, also for rom-com and political thriller up her sleeve. That's awesome. I mean, jumping around too much though does make your marketing hard, but it doesn't hurt to like jump around until you find the thing that you really like. I should say, by the way, one of the reasons why I actually think that pantsing is, I won't say better, but has a lot going for it, is that if you pants, you're more likely to be authentic, and you're more likely to tell this engaging story that you yourself would want to read, because you don't know what it's going to be like. Now I feel like you can pants an outline as well and then write to that outline. But the art of like coming at the story from passion and true personal interest is going to always create a better story than coming at it from like what's commercially viable. Because I do maintain that provided that the writing is good, every story is commercially viable. There is an audience for every story. Like for me, I've made millions of dollars writing books. I would bet that I have less than 50,000 people have read my books. And I probably have like between 10 and 20,000 like big fans. And of those, maybe 5,000 have read everything I've written. Maybe, probably not even that many, you know. So really my business is built on 5 to 10,000 super fans. Um, and that's not a lot of people, right? It takes a while to find them all, especially because I write a niche within a niche, technically, if you want to get specific. But yeah, as long as but I'm authentic about it and I bring like all my soul and my spirit to it. So I'm able to I'm able to draw people in because of that. All right, who else we have? Amy Robinson says, I'd love to know some of the business podcasts you listen to. Great advice. If it weren't for editing, it'd definitely be a dream job. Well, Marisha, one of the ways to get around that is don't edit. Do what I did. Write 100 books and then hand first drafts to your author, to your editor. You need an editor you can trust, by the way, that understands your voice and everything. But you can do that. Like, to my knowledge, Lee Child, who wrote the Jack Reacher books, only wrote first drafts and they handed them off to his editor as well. Like, this is actually not a super uncommon thing to do just a first draft. What it really comes down to is writing a good first draft, and some of that comes down to more than just like the just being good, right? Than like knowing sentence structure and stuff like that. It comes down to like thinking about like I'm writing a scene here. Who's going to be here? What's going to happen in the scene? So I start the scene. It's on the bridge of a starship. Let's pretend it's the bridge of the Enterprise because we can all imagine what that looks like. And the reader has never been on the bridge of the Enterprise before, so and they don't know what it looks like. Let's just pretend that exists. That scenario exists. Of course, it exists. There's people out there who've never seen the bridge of the Enterprise, and there's going to be a shootout on the bridge of the Enterprise, right? So if I start this scene and it's just Kirk and Spock talking to each other for like a page, and then I move off into some sort of encounter with some sort of spacecraft, and then someone beams onto the bridge and the shootout happens. Well, how does this reader know what the bridge looks like? How does the reader know who's going to be there? What I know and what I do from the start is I'm like, I need to establish what this place looks like. Are there consoles? Are there chairs? Is it like got like a sort of a pit like the Imperial Star Destroyers do? Um, how many people are there? Are they spread around the perimeter of the room? Are they centered in the middle? How big is it? Who's there? Who are the important people? Like mention a few other names. I will set all that up at the beginning of the scene, and I'll I'll get the basics in that people can draw the room size in their head, for the people who do that, and then I'll sort of dribble and drab a few other things in there, about who's there and where they're positioned. I might have them walk somewhere so you get a picture, a view of the space, so that when the action starts, I don't have to stop the action to explain the position of everybody and how things look. The reader is going to figure it out. They beam in at the front view screen, and we know that the only thing that there's nothing between them and the captain's chair, or there's two pilot consoles, depending on the version of the Enterprise and everything like that, and who might be there. Um, so the reader knows that instantly. They know where the cover is and whatnot because they've painted this picture in their mind. And being good at writing, a lot of it is doing that properly the first time. And if you do that properly the first time, every time, it reduces your editing dramatically because the scene is set up correctly from the start. Um, and then also from an editing perspective, if I forgot that McCoy needs to be on the bridge, and I'm halfway through the scene, I just have McCoy suddenly magically be there and drop a note saying go back and add McCoy from the beginning of the scene. Like for me, if I'm doing editing, that's typically what it is. I already know what I need to do, and there's a comment telling me what I need to do, and I just go back, go through the comments, do the things I need to do, and then ship it off to the editor. Hey Rosa, how are you doing today? That's my thoughts on editing. I don't like editing either. A lot of times I'm like, I've already spent too much time with this book. I don't want to read it again. A lot of my readers have read my books way more times than I have, which is something I kind of love and find pretty interesting. Um, I have a bunch of points here I want to do. Oh yeah, there was a cool saying. The podcast. Oh, I closed the window for the podcast because my computer was running choppy. I think the guy's name is Cameron. I'm going to pull up my watch history so I can tell you what it is. So the interesting thing is I actually listen to a lot of agnostic, atheist, and philosophy podcasts, and they branch off into business sometimes, and And sometimes these people are brought onto business podcasts because they have thoughts on business. So it kind of is what helps me sort of get my feet wet and everything. So the podcast I was listening to is by Chris Williamson. He's pretty interesting. He's got I actually don't know a lot about his thoughts. I don't know what his stance is on a lot of things, so I can't really advocate for him directly as someone worth following. But he's had a lot of guests on, and he lets the guests do most of the talking. So I've enjoyed his conversations with a lot of his guests that he's had on there. But something that he said in the podcast I was most recently listening to is volume negates luck. I really feel that, like, when I started really hitting it off with my writing, for those of you who don't know, like, I've been working on writing. I wrote my first book when I was 12. Take that for what it is. Um, but I was trying to write novels earnestly from about age 16 onward. Um, like, really working at learning novels, working on world building, all sorts of things like that. Um, and the first book that I really finished that's part of my science fiction universe that I now have, I finished that book in 2008. And then I worked on trying to write the sequel to that book and failed because I didn't know the characters well enough. So I decided to write a prequel. Um, and I got that prequel written in like late 2010, and I got it edited and yada yada yada, and I published it in 2012. So from getting that first book done and being like, okay, this is the framework that I want to write in, to publishing was about 6 years. And I probably did everything wrong with that first book. It went nowhere. Um, and then book three came out in June of 2016. And then book four came out in November. And book four was actually that book I wrote initially back in 2008 that I knew I needed to write prequels for. That one prequel became three. And then the first book actually became book four because I decided to not be George Lucas and to go back and and actually publish the stuff in order, um, rather than doing four, five, six, one, two, three kind of thing. So anyway, 2016, we are now 9 years from when I started writing that book that came out. So it took 9 years for that book to actually see the light of day. 'Cause I think I started writing it in 2007, got it done in 2008, and then went on to write the prequels, and had sold maybe 2,000 books in that time. Um, if I'm lucky. Like, I don't even think it was that high. And then Jill figured out Facebook ads, and that's when things really took off. And so by by November of 2016, we were doing like well over five figures a month, from books with only four books. Now the world was different in 2016. There were millions fewer books in existence. Um, but why am I bringing that up right now? Oh yeah, because I knew as I'm doing this, like, Jill and I, despite not having success, Jill and I had been in the indie author sphere for some time. And we saw that a lot of the authors who were hitting it big back at the beginning of the teens, were gone by 2016. And I knew that unless I had volume, um, I was not going to be able to sustain what I have. I recognized that even though the advertising was really what was driving us forward, the story that I told, like, I didn't at that point understand why that first book that I put out resonated with people. I just knew that it worked. It was a lightning strike in some regards, a lightning strike that took about 4 years to make it from the sky to the ground. Um, but I was like, I don't fully understand why this book is so good. It was a bit of a fluke. And so I said, I am going to produce so many books that that the volume of books that I'm going to have out will negate, will offset, will make up for the luck that I've had thus far. And that's what I ended up doing. And that's why I thought that was really cool when you said that volume negates luck. Cause I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what I did. I went for volume. Um, and I like that quite a bit. So, um, I feel like that's like my entire spiel, which actually I guess was 35 minutes long. That's a long TED talk. Um, I didn't talk a lot about ads today, other than the one bit of advice for Pippa. But if anyone had any questions about ads, you can certainly ask those. Um, we are, of course, again doing starting in September. It starts at the very end of August. The advanced ads class, and very soon Jill and I are working on having a new membership class starting up. Um, And the goal with these is that like our one-on-one consulting is not cheap. And it's not cheap because it's like there's only so much of me. And for my team members who all work part-time, they're also writers, right? So they only do some part-time. We're limited by human hours to do things. So time is at a premium. So time is very expensive. And I recognize that. And so what we're working on is things that we can do more group instruction, group class. So there's a number of things coming that way. And that's going to be one of our big pushes this fall. And from that other thing too is when it comes to like the business of the writing wives, we are also trying to make as many clay pots as possible because doing that is making us better at our business, and it's making me a better teacher, teaching in all these different ways, trying to help people in different ways, exposing myself to the problems that different people are having in different genres and all sorts of things. That's what's making me better at what I am at my job. Um, and it's not doing the same thing over and over again. It's trying new things and exploring and experimenting. And one of the things I actually really do want to start doing is focusing more on the things that don't work, and talking about the things that don't work more and why I know that. Alex Hormazi, in that podcast, was talking about how, so again, he makes gym management software. Um, and he was talking about how um, he said it was every 2 to 3 weeks they do this, which was mind blowing. He said that they do tests, and they said they'll spend $50 to $100,000 on a test, and the test could be something like, can you sell gym memberships via chat, or does this marketing thing work, does that marketing thing work? And he said oftentimes the answer is no. The control, well, the way they're doing things now, works better than the new thing that they tried to do. And so what he'll do is he'll share that information with their customers, saying like, hey, we tested out this thing, we found that it didn't work, here's how we did it, here was our methodology. And he said a lot of times people are quite happy to learn that because then they don't have to try it themselves. Or if they do want to try it, they can take what he learned and then try to pivot off of that, or try to like do things a different way. Or maybe they measure by a different method. So it's okay. So I thought that was really interesting. And I do a lot of stuff like that. Like I'm constantly trying things and having them not work. Um, because I'm aware of the fact that like Facebook's a black box and marketing in many regards is a black box. So what didn't work a year ago might work now. So I'm constantly testing stuff and retrying stuff. So I might do more of that too, sort of talking about like, here's a case study on what didn't work and why I think it didn't work. Um, that I think could be pretty interesting stuff too. Marcia says there's so much that people say you have to do that's overwhelming. Knowing what not to bother with would be a great time saver. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um, and it's also like the 80-20 rule too, right? Like 20% of your effort is what's getting you 80% of your results. And 80% of your effort is getting you 20% of your results. So a really big part of running any business is identifying what that 80% is, making sure there's no golden BBs in there, and then stop doing it. Because it's a waste of time. And really what it comes down to is like, um, I actually, and what the golden BB thing is really important though, because one of the things that could consume 80% of your effort and only give you 20% of your returns in the short term is community building and building super fans. At the very beginning, that's a lot of work to build community and super fans, but eventually that will be a multiplier. Those people will bring in so many more readers. So it's a lot. Early on, it's a lot of like legwork and beating the streets and whatnot. But in the end, it pays for itself quite well. So you also have to say like, is this particular thing an investment or not? How do I think it will pay off? I think that matters as well. And that's a lot of analysis. But I think that's kind of where I want to wrap it up. So, no silver bullets, just 100 golden BBs. Figure out what they are, figure out what all that nuance is that you need to work on. Those little things that stack up. Very rarely is there one big thing that's a game changer. It's dotting your I's and crossing your T's everywhere. It's writing the right, it's like testing multiple taglines, testing hooks, testing blurbs, understanding the genre and trope really well, how that's being communicated to make the right cover, the right title. Titles are so important. And so often when we're authors, we make titles that are kind of more for us than they are for the reader. I am super duper guilty of that. I'll make titles because they have symmetry. And that doesn't matter in many cases for the marketing standpoint. Um, but then also, like, do we have open loops in our stories? Are we opening up new threads? Are we introducing future plot lines 3 books ago, to make sure that we are constantly pulling readers forward and giving them reasons to keep going through our series? There's a lot of little things that we have to do, and a lot of those things are just they involve skill and practice, you know. So you got to make those 100 clay pots, and be okay with the fact that not all of them are going to be perfect, because that's author school, right? That's where anything else that you want to learn, you want to be an electrician or something like that, you're going to drop a bunch of coin on going to school, and you're going to work as a journeyman for a while. It's going to cost you a lot of time and money. While being an author is the same thing, except we're paying ourselves in a way in time, and we're and money if you're advertising, and that's just part of the learning process. So, and also remember, I think this one's really important. Moving back to the mean, you know, de-differentiating yourself so you fit in the mainstream so that you match the algorithm removes your main competitive advantage. Your main competitive advantage is your own authenticity and uniqueness. So don't sacrifice that to fit in your lives or in your writing. But we're talking mostly about writing, of course. And if your authenticity shows through in your marketing and whatnot, that's what's going to draw people in. I'm actually working on a case study right now with an author who we get 15 to 25 newsletter signups for her a day off her reader magnet that she has up, and we're running like a $5 a day ad to it. It might be 10. I forget the exact spend right now, but her um, each conversion costs less than 30 cents, which is great. And we're basically able to get her over 1,000 new people onto her newsletter each month. And a huge part of that is because the ad copy, and she did most of the ad copy herself. I kind of helped finesse some of it, but she really nailed it. Is so authentic and feels so much like the author, the marketer who wrote the ad copy, is like an embodiment of the character so well that the person reading it just feels like I totally feel like I'm in the story just reading this ad copy. Um, and it's working so well for her. So I'm going to be doing a case study on that as well. Please send me the case. Of course, I can send you the case study when it's done, honey. I was just going to sit on it. I think actually I hadn't told Jill that I got permission to do the case study yet. So this might be news to her as well. But anyway, I'm going to let you guys jet because my throat is dry from talking this much. I hope you guys have a fabulous day and a fabulous weekend as always. And I'll see you next Thursday. Same bad time, same bad channel. Ciao.